2 minutes.
Recording in progress.
Bonjour tout le monde. D'abord, mes excuses
Good
pour le
afternoon.
retard.
First of all,
Merci pour votre
apologies for my
patience.
delay. Thank you for your
Just 1 second,
patience.
I just
Excusez-moi,
Sorry.
c'est dans un autre contexte.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's press conference. My name is Mia Rabson and I am with the Canadian Press and I'll be moderating today's event. Before we begin, I just need to read a few words on a few important preventative measures to share. To prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries, we remind all in-person participants to keep their earpieces away from all microphones at all times. When you are not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table. Please consult the cards on the table for the guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. These measures are in place so that we can protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters, and conduct our business without interruption. Thank you all for your cooperation. We have with us today Minister Joël Lightbound. He will make a statement, and then we will have questions in the room. If you are on the line, please use the raise hand function to indicate that you would like to ask a question. Go ahead, Minister.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. And just so we're clear, I have remarks entirely in French to begin with, and then entirely in English. So they're both the same, but I'll start with the French remarks and then go through the English remarks. Alors, merci d'être là aujourd'hui.
Thank you for being here today. A few months ago, Canadians elected our government with a clear mandate to reduce our operational expenses to ensure the viability of our essential services. We were asked to act with determination and not postpone difficult but necessary decisions for the benefit of the country. That's exactly what we're doing today by announcing concrete measures to stabilize the financial situation of Canada Post. Because Canada Post is a vital national institution. It's the older than the country itself that has contributed to build it. For 158 years, postal workers have served Canadians in good weather, bad weather, in the villages, rural and urban areas, in rural and indigenous communities. Canada Post is an institution that deserves to be saved. And today, let's be clear, it's an institution that needs to be saved. It's an institution that needs to be saved because since 2018, it has accumulated losses of more than $5 billion because only in 2024, the company declared about $1.3 billion in operational losses that needed an infusion of $1.4 billion this year to prevent the company from becoming insolvent. Now, in the second quarter of 2025, the company has lost $407 million, and this is the worst quarter in its history. And today, Canada Post is losing about $10 million every day. In summary, Canada Post is facing an existential crisis. So now, how did we get to this point? Times have changed. 20 years ago, Canada Post was delivering 5.5 billion letters per year. Today, it's 2 billion. During this time, the number of residents is continuing increasing, and the result is that there's more mails going to more addresses. The costs have remained the same. Canadians are receiving more parcels, something that could have saved the company. But now Canada Post has lost ground. In 2019, the company was delivering 62%. Now it's 24%. It's spectacular loss in 6 years alone, while the private competitors have gained ground with rapid services, more flexible and more competitive services. To these two trends, there's government restrictions imposed over the years and tight relations between the corporation and the union that has undermined the corporation's capacity to adapt. At the end of all that, the situation is clear. Canada Post is insolvent, is providing essential services throughout the country, particularly in rural, remote, and indigenous communities. Canadians are attached to this corporation. But the solution cannot be to continuously infuse more money year after year. We need to act, and we need to start the transformation of Canada Post. In its report of the 15th of May, the Industrial Inquiry Commission led by Kaplan gave recommendations. That is why we are announcing that today we are announcing the recommendations of the Kaplan report, and we shall implement all these recommendations that we made to the government to stabilize the financial situation of Canada Post. In detail, first of all, I'm instructing Canada Post to ease its delivery standards. Mail is being delivered 2 to 3 days. By adjusting its standards, particularly by withdrawing the requirement to deliver to every address 5 days a week and allowing other non-urgent mail to be sent by land, they will be able to save about 20 million per year. Furthermore, the government is ending the moratorium on community mailbox conversions. Already, 3/4 of Canadians receive their mail either in a community mailbox or in a mailbox in a building or in a rural mailbox. Only 1/4 of Canadians still receive their mail directly at home. This is a costly service. For example, delivery per address per year by resident is about $200 and something compared to $19 in the community mailbox. Today, we are authorizing Canada Post to convert about 4,000 additional mailboxes, and this would allow a savings of about 400 million at the end. Furthermore, as the Kaplan report recommended, we are removing the rural moratorium and have asked Canada Post to come back with a plan to protect services in rural and remote and indigenous communities. To give you the context, the rural moratorium was imposed in 2014 and covers about 4 million sites and has not changed for 30 years. The country has changed. As a result, zones that used to be rural have become suburbs or even urban areas. In some cases, we have several offices close together, some meters away, which have to remain open in spite of because of the moratorium. And this prevents the corporation from tightening its network and to become more competitive. Let me be clear. Canada Post has the obligation to serve all Canadians everywhere in the country, and this situation will not change. Lastly, the government is reviewing the process that has to do with stamp rates. The objective is to modernize it and to speed up the process, as Commissioner Kaplan recommended. The measures announced today will help stabilize the financial situation of Canada Post and help save up to $500 million a year. It will not be sufficient. In addition to the measures I'm announcing today, Canada Post must adapt. Just as the government is revising its expenditure to be more efficient, to invest more, and to protect our social programs, I'm asking Canada Post to do the same. I'm therefore asking them to take immediate action to respond to these financial challenges, reduce operational costs, and this also means reviewing and lightening its management structures. Canada Post is facing an existential crisis, we need to respond. Today's announcement wants to make sure that Canada Post is ready to take up the challenge and continue serving Canadians for generations to come. I know that Canadians care about the future of Canada Post. Canada Post workers care about its future, and its management also care about Canada Post. I am optimistic that today's announcement will help renew the relationship so that we can save this institution that deserves to be saved. Thank you very much. I'll now move over to my remarks in English.
So a few months ago, Canadians elected our government and gave us a clear mandate. They asked us to reduce operating costs so as to ensure that essential services are sustainable. They asked us to be decisive and to lead in the best interest of Canadians. Today, we're doing just that by taking concrete actions to stabilize the financial situation at Canada Post and by taking steps to chart its future path. Because Canada Post is a vital national institution, an institution older than our country and that has helped build it. Because for 158 years, and to this day, postal workers have connected Canadians, rain or shine, in small town and in big cities, providing a lifeline to hundreds of northern, Indigenous, and rural communities. Because Canada Post is an institution worth saving, and because at this junction in its history, it's an institution that needs saving. To give you a sense of what I mean when I say it's an institution that needs saving, since 2018, Canada Post has accumulated more than $5 billion in losses. Last year, in 2024, it operated at a loss of $1.3 billion and required an injection of $1 billion in January to keep it afloat. In the second quarter of 2025, the corporation lost $407 million, their worst quarter ever. And at present, the corporation is losing $10 million every day. In short, Canada Post is effectively insolvent, and it is facing an existential crisis. Now, how did we get there? Well, 20 years ago, Canada Post delivered 5.5 billion letters per year. Today, that number is 2 billion. And while the number of letters has dropped, the number of households has increased. Thus, Canada Post is delivering fewer letters to more addresses. Second, while letter mail volumes decline, Canadians have been sending and receiving more packages than ever before. But they're turning increasingly away from Canada Post and toward private competitors who are faster and more cost efficient. In 2019, Canada Post delivered 62% of all parcels sent in Canada. Today, it's less than 24% and shrinking fast. Now, the third reason we got here is that government-imposed restrictions and a stalled relationship between management and labor have hindered Canada Post's capacity to evolve and adapt. So the bottom line is this. Canada Post is effectively insolvent. It provides an essential service to Canadians, and in particular to rural, remote, and Indigenous communities, and Canadians are rightfully attached to it and want it saved. However, repeated bailouts from the federal government are not the solution. So where do we go from here? In its report of May 15, the Industrial Inquiry Commission, led by William Kaplan, addressed these challenges and provided a path forward. And today, I'm announcing that we're accepting all of the recommendations directed to the government by William Kaplan in its report, and that we're making the following changes to stabilize the financial situation at Canada Post. I'm instructing Canada Post to introduce flexibilities in their delivery standards. The average households receive just 2 letters per week, yet operations are still designed for much higher volumes. Adjusting delivery standards will allow non-urgent mail to travel by ground instead of air and will save more than $20 million a year to the corporation. Next, the government is removing the moratorium on the conversion to community mailboxes. 3/4 of Canadians already receive mail through community, apartment, or rural mailboxes, while 1/4 still receive door-to-door delivery. It's an expensive service, and by way of example, delivering mail to an individual address costs the corporation $279 a year, whereas delivering mail to a community mailbox costs $157 a year. And 77% of Canadians already receive mail through various form of community boxes. As such, I'm authorizing Canada Post to introduce community mailboxes to approximately 4 million more addresses, which will save the corporation nearly $400 million per year in due term. Now, as recommended in the Kaplan report, we'll also be lifting the rural moratorium, and I'm instructing Canada Post to come back with a plan that will ensure protection of service in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities. To give some context, the rural moratorium was imposed in 1994 and covers close to 4,000 locations. It has not evolved in 30 years, but Canada has changed. This means that areas that used to be rural may now be suburban or even urban. It also means that multiple post offices operating near each other, including some just a few hundred meters apart, are required to stay open because of the moratorium. Lifting this moratorium will allow Canada Post to right-size its network to adapt to today's demographics, but I want to be clear. Canada Post has an obligation to serve all Canadians in every community in Canada, and that will not change. Lastly, the government is reviewing the process for increases to the stamp rate to modernize and shorten it in line with Commissioner Kaplan's recommendations. Taken together, these measures will help stabilize Canada Post's financial situation by generating close to $500 million per year. But there's more work to do. As our government reviews its expenses so that we can spend less and invest more, I'm asking Canada Post to do the same. In addition to the measures I'm announcing today, the corporation must adapt. I'm asking Canada Post to take immediate steps to address its financial challenges. That means finding efficiencies, reducing costs, reducing overhead, and I want to be clear, that also means reviewing and lightening its management structure. This is a pivotal moment, not just for the corporation, but for Canadians who rely on it every single day. Today's announcement is about making sure Canada Post can meet this moment and continue to serve Canadians for generations to come. Canadians care about the future of Canada Post, and I know both workers and management share that same commitment. I hope that in light of today's announcement and the work ahead, both management and the union can return to the table with a renewed relationship and work toward a viable future. Canada Post is facing an existential crisis. It's an institution that is worth saving, and we're beginning the work today. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We'll turn now to the room for questions. We will start with one question and one follow, and we'll begin with Alessia Pasafume from the Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister. The union has said that they were not told that this announcement was coming and that a meeting you had scheduled with them was postponed. Why didn't you keep them in the loop about the changes that were going to be made?
Yes, well, first, I want to thank the union. We've had a productive conversation Friday last week, and some of the issues that they raised are reflected in the announcement I'm making today, notably around reviewing the management structure at Canada Post, but also the process in terms of increasing the price of stamps. Now, as far as a meeting is concerned this week, I was not aware, but I'll be always happy to meet with the union to discuss, because they play an essential role in Canada Post's future. And I know that just as much as I do, just as much as Canadians do, they care very much about the future of Canada Post and its financial viability.
To Canada Post here, have you made any progress in finding a buyer for the pandemic era mobile hospitals, or are we just stuck with them?
I'll be happy to take this offline after the Canada Post announcement, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Christian Noel, Radio Canada.
Bonjour, Monsieur Lightbound.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lightbound. For those listening to us from home, to be clear, is this the beginning of the end for day-to-day, door-to-door delivery? Answer, there are two things you've just stated. First of all, for 77% of Canadians, there's no residential delivery. Most Canadians receive their mail in community mailboxes or in buildings, so not necessarily at their door. Yes, we are lifting the obligation to deliver letter mail every day, 5 days a week at home. It will depend on operational needs of Canada Post. It's not going to happen overnight. The corporation has to inform Canadians. This reflects the reality where it is becoming less necessary considering the reduction in volume?
So there are two things in the question. First, 77% of Canadians don't receive their mail delivered directly at their door. They receive it through rural mailboxes or community mailboxes or in apartment buildings. So we're lifting the moratorium, which will mean 4 million more addresses will now be covered, well, in years to come through community mailboxes. So that's the first part. The second part is we're lifting the requirement for Canada Post to deliver mail every day, so 5 days a week, to individuals. That will allow the corporation to go based on volume, so deliver where delivery is needed instead of going every day to every address.
J'aimerais savoir donc ce que vous dites aux personnes âgées et à mobilité réduite
Now,
qui
what are you
reçoivent beaucoup de
telling
courriels à la maison alors qu'ils ne
people
peuvent pas
with
être au
reduced
transport?
mobility and
Et à quel
seniors
point aussi
who have to receive
ça règle le
mail, who
problème
are now
financier
receiving
de
mail
Post
at home?
Canada qui est insolvable
Now,
et est en
is
situation
this
existentielle?
resolve the financial problem of
Vous semblez suggérer que tout ça
Canada
va pas
Post,
régler le problème
which is
maintenant. Quoi
facing an
d'autre
existential
devront-nous faire
crisis?
pour
You are
sauver
saying
Post
that
Canada
it's
et
not going
d'arrêter
to
d'investir de
resolve
l'argent
the
tous
problem.
les années?
What else can be
Oui,
done
donc,
to
par rapport à
help
la première
Canada
question,
Post
c'est une
from
très
stop
bonne
losing
question.
more
Puis,
money every day?
je dois vous dire, dans mon propre
Answer.
comté,
In my own riding,
80% de la population
80%
reçoit son
of
comté
the
directement,
population
reçoit son courrier directement
receive
à
their
domicile.
mail directly at home.
Eu égard aux personnes âgées,
Now,
il y a
considering
un programme qui a
seniors,
été mis en
a
place quand les
program
conversions vers des
was
boîtes postales
introduced
communautaires ont
when
commencé,
community mailbox
qui fonctionne
conversion
très bien, qui
started, and it
permet,
works
quand
very
une personne
well.
est à mobilité
When
réduite,
someone
plus
has
difficulté à
reduced
se rendre à une boîte
mobility, has
postale
difficulty
communautaire,
getting to a
d'obtenir
community
de
mailbox,
l'assistance.
they can
Donc,
obtain
alors que ces changements
assistance.
vont s'effectuer à
As
travers
these changes
pour les 4
take
millions
root
d'adresses qui
for the
restent
4
à convertir
million
vers des boîtes postales
addresses that
communautaires,
have to be converted
Post
into
Canada va
community
informer la
mailboxes, Canada
population
Post would
de ce
inform
programme,
the
comment y
population
accéder,
of this program
pour
and how
s'assurer
to
que tous les
access it to make
Canadiens, quelles que
sure
soient leurs
that all
circonstances,
Canadians,
puissent continuer
irrespective
d'avoir
of their
accès à leur courrier.
circumstances,
Fait que
could
c'est la première
continue
des choses par
receiving
rapport
their mail.
aux aînés ou aux personnes qui auraient des
So that's
difficultés
what I
à
have to
accéder à
say
une boîte
about
postale communautaire.
seniors and people
La
with
deuxième
reduced
chose,
mobility. The second thing,
pour moi, la viabilité financière
the
de Post Canada,
financial
elle
viability
commence
of
avec
Canada
l'annonce
Post
d'aujourd'hui.
starts with
Non, ça ne
today's
s'arrêtera pas
announcement. It
aujourd'hui.
will
C'est
not
sûr
stop today.
qu'il reste du
It
chemin à
is
parcourir. C'est
certain
pourquoi
that
je
there's
demande,
still a
entre
lot
autres,
of
à la
work
société
to
de
be done. That's why I'm
revoir ses
asking the
opérations, réduire
corporation
ses
to
coûts,
review its
revoir sa
operations,
structure
reduce cost,
de
review
gestion.
its management
Mais on ne peut
structure.
pas avoir une discussion
We
sérieuse
can't
par
have a
rapport à la
serious
viabilité
discussion
financière à
about the
long terme de Post
financial
Canada si on ne met
viability
pas en
of
place ces
Canada Post in the long
recommandations-là,
term
qui
if
sont le
those
fruit non seulement
recommendations are not
de
implemented,
ma réflexion
which
avec,
are
avec
the
notre
fruit
équipe,
not
mais
only of
certainement
my
aussi
reflections with my
du
team,
du
but
commissaire
of
Kaplan,
the
qui a étudié la
of
question de fond en
Commissioner
comble et qui a émis ces
Kaplan,
recommandations-là au
who
gouvernement.
thoroughly
Et comme je le
studied
mentionnais, ça va
the
permettre
issue
d'économiser à
and made
terme
recommendations to the
à peu près un
government.
demi-milliard par année.
So this would help
Puis de la
save
façon dont je
about
le vois, à
half
partir du
a
moment où
billion dollars a year.
c'est ma conviction, c'est celle de notre
I,
gouvernement, Post
I
Canada est un
and the
service
government believe
essentiel,
that
c'est une
Canada Post
institution,
is an
une institution
essential
qu'il faut
service.
sauver.
It's an
Il y a deux
institution
options.
that needs to be
Soit
served. There are
qu'on
two options.
continue
Either we
de renflouer les coffres
continue
de Post Canada,
infusing funds to Canada Post,
d'injecter des sommes toujours plus importantes au cours des
providing
prochaines
more and
années.
more money
Soit
to
on,
Canada
on
Post,
agit maintenant, on
or
investit
we
dans la
act now,
transition, dans
we
la
invest
transformation de Post
in
Canada
the
pour
transition and
atteindre la
transformation of
viabilité
Canada
financière. Je crois
Post
que c'est
to
possible.
help them get to financial viability. I think it's possible.
Yeah. So as I've mentioned, 77% of Canadians don't receive their mail delivered directly at their door. So for the remaining 4 million addresses that will now be covered through community mailboxes, as Canada Post has in years past converted and implemented community mailboxes, it's also developed a program to assist with those senior citizens or people with disabilities who might have issues reaching the community mailboxes to make sure that they have access to their mail. So as this is rolled out across the 4 million addresses that remain to be converted, Canada Post will inform Canadians as they go and make sure that that program is well known, well understood, and it's worked very efficiently to make sure that all Canadians, regardless of their circumstances, have access to their mail.
Stephanie Taylor, The National Post.
Hi, Minister. I think Canadians understand the numbers where things are with Canada Post, but what makes you think that what makes your government think that people will be accepting these changes? I'm thinking particularly of seniors and those relying on rural postal offices that could be closed, and those who do still like and maybe use the door-to-door delivery.
That's a very good question, and I think collectively as a country we've had that debate in the past, and I remember certainly 2015 and even Denis Coderre in Montreal removing a community mailbox. However, the reality has changed over the last 10 years. It's changed a lot over the last 5 years. It's changed in many ways. First, it's changed the financial situation of Canada Post has changed drastically. While it was profitable in 2015, it is clearly no longer viable financially. And the second thing, the reality has changed in terms of the number of letters we're getting, how we're using Canada Post services. So I think there's an understanding amongst Canadians that something needs to happen if we want to preserve that institution. And I think what we're doing today is the start of this transformation. And the goal ultimately is to save Canada Post.
I got on the fa- Sorry.
Oui. Ouais, OK. Oui. On me demandait qu'est-ce qui
I was
Qu'est-ce qui nous
asked
porte à croire
what
qu'aujourd'hui les
makes us to
Canadiens sont
believe
prêts à
that
accepter
today
les changements qu'on
Canadians
propose? Mais
are ready
d'abord,
to
tu sais,
accept the changes
il y
we're
a beaucoup des
proposing.
changements qui ont déjà été
Lots
implantés.
of
Quand je le
changes
mentionne,
have
c'est
already
pas
been
rien.
implemented.
Quand on dit que 67%
When we
des
talk
Canadiens
about
reçoivent
the
déjà
fact that
leur courrier dans des
77%
boîtes
of
postales
Canadians
communautaires,
already receive their mailboxes in
maintenant,
community mailboxes,
j'ai le
that
souvenir,
is
comme d'autres,
important. I,
de
like
débats
many
qu'on a eu
others,
collectivement par
remember
rapport à
the
ça, entre
collective
autres en
debates we
2015.
had
Puis
about that
l'image qui me vient en tête,
in
c'est Denis
2015,
Coderre
and
à
I
Montréal
think about
qui a
Denis
retiré une
Coderre
boîte
in
postale
Montreal,
communautaire. Mais
who
la
brought down a
réalité, c'est
community
qu'il y a
mailbox.
10 ans,
The reality is that
il le faisait avec,
10 years
you know,
ago,
avec toute l'imagerie qu'on lui connaît, avec un marteau-piqueur, si je me souviens bien. Mais la
he
réalité,
did
c'est qu'il y a
that
10 ans,
with
les
all
habitudes des
pomp.
Canadiens étaient différentes
But
au
the
égard au
attitude
courrier.
of
Et la
Canadians
réalité
was different,
financière
and the
de
financial
Post
reality
Canada était
of
complètement
Canada
différente.
Post
En
is
2015, Post Canada
totally
était
different.
profitable.
In
Depuis les 7
2015,
dernières années,
Canada
il ne
Post
l'est
was
plus.
profitable. It's no
Au
longer
point
the
où,
case.
depuis
And
2018, c'est
since
5 milliards de
2018,
déficit cumulé pour la
there's a
société.
cumulative
C'est 1
deficit of
milliard qu'on a
5
dû
billion.
injecter. Et si on
And we
regarde
had to inject
les années à
money.
venir, il
And
faudrait
if
que
we
les
look
Canadiens
into the
injectent
future,
toujours plus
Canadians
d'argent
will
dans Post
continue
Canada pour
giving
juste le
Canada Post
garder
more money
viable.
just to keep it afloat.
Je pense que,
I think
conscient de cette réalité-là,
that
et aussi du fait
aware of
qu'on
that
reçoit, on
reality
utilise moins
and the
la
fact
Poste, la
that
pandémie
people
a
are
contribué
using
dans les 5
the
dernières années.
post
Je pense que les
less
Canadiens
and
sont prêts
less,
à ce qu'on
particularly
prenne
because of the
ces actions qui
pandemic.
sont décisives, mais qui vont
We
permettre
understand that these actions are decisive,
de
but
sauver cette
will help
institution-là
save
qui
this
joue un rôle
institution,
essentiel
which plays
et
an
à laquelle les
essential
Canadiens
role
sont attachés.
and which Canadians care about.
And to clarify, do you have an idea in mind of how long this phase out process would take from the door to door delivery to kind of all addresses, or as many as Canada Post might want to, with the barring the exceptions, to
Yeah.
get to the community mailboxes?
We're-
How long is that phase
We're
out?
talking about 4 million addresses. It'll happen over the course of the next 9 years, the bulk of which will be in the next 4 years, 3-4 years.
Olivier Ferron-Procey, TVA.
Merci Mia. Bonjour Monsieur le ministre.
Thank you. Good afternoon,
Est-ce
Mr.
que
Minister.
le retour à la rentabilité de Post
Returning
Canada
to
est réaliste
profitability
selon
by Canada
vous?
Post, is this a
Je pense
reality?
que oui.
Is it realistic
Je ne
someday?
pense pas que ça va être facile,
Yes, I don't think it's
mais
going to
je
be
crois que c'est
easy,
possible.
but I
Quand on
think it's
regarde
possible.
ce qu'on
When we
annonce
look
aujourd'hui,
at today's
à
announcement,
terme, un demi-milliard. Quand on voit le
ultimately
processus pour alléger
about half
l'augmentation
a
du prix
billion
des
dollars.
timbres pour qu'ils
When we
reflètent
look at what
davantage
we
la
need to
réalité
do
internationale,
to
parce que les
change
autres pays ont
stamp
augmenté le
rates
prix des timbres.
to reflect the reality of other
Si on
countries.
voit ce que
If
Post
we
Canada,
look,
je leur donne 45 jours pour le
I'm
faire,
giving them
là, arrive avec
45
un plan
days
pour
to do so, to give
répondre à
a
ces défis
plan
financiers
on
avec
how
des
they would
actions immédiates,
respond to
entre
these
autres en revoyant
financial
sa structure de
challenges
gestion.
and measures
Je crois qu'il
to
y a
review
moyen.
their
Et puis
structures
ici aussi,
and
il y a une
management
partie
structures
que je
and
ne contrôle
operations.
pas, qu'on
There's
contrôle pas,
something that
qui
we
est
do not control,
clairement indiqué dans le rapport
clearly
de la Commission, le
indicated
rapport Kaplan,
in the Kaplan
eu
report,
égard disons, à la flexibilité ou à la
considering
latitude qu'a
the
Post Canada
flexibility
pour,
and
par
latitude
exemple,
that
livrer
Canada
courrier les fins de
Post may
semaine,
have to deliver mail
engager
on
des gens à temps
weekends,
partiel.
recruit
Ça, c'est pour
part-time
le
workers.
syndicat et pour la
That
direction
is
à s'entendre.
up
Puis
to the
je crois que les
management
deux
and the
ont
union.
à cœur la viabilité
I think
financière.
they
Donc,
both
je
care
pense que
about the
si
financial
tout ça se
viability
place comme il faut,
of the company.
il y a moyen
If all
d'atteindre
that is done,
peut-être pas la
it's
rentabilité, mais
possible to
disons, un
get
seuil de, là, j'ai juste le mot en anglais qui me vient en
to
tête, le break-even, mais qu'on arrive
a break-even point.
à joindre les deux bouts, si vous voulez.
Parce que là, avec
Question.
les économies qu'on
With
projette,
the
puis les
savings
demandes que vous faites à
expected
Post Canada
and
pour
the
réduire ce coût
demands you're
d'opération,
making for Canada Post
on
to
n'arrive
reduce
pas
its
là, à
operational
gagner
cost,
près d'1 milliard si on additionne tout ça.
we will not
Qu'est-ce qui
get
serait
to
un
the
niveau
1
de
billion
perte acceptable
that
pour
we
votre
are
gouvernement à
expecting.
court
What
terme?
would be an acceptable loss that the
Ben,
government can
moi,
accept in the
je regarde
short
ça d'une
term?
autre manière. C'est-à-dire
Answer.
que
I
si
have
on fait
another
rien,
perspective. If
les
nothing
niveaux de
is
pertes sont
done,
carrément inacceptables. Je veux
new
dire,
losses
tu
will
disais, on
be
parle d'à peu
unacceptable.
près
Today we are
2,7
talking
milliards
about
par année. On parle
2.7
de 8
billion per
milliards pour
year,
les 5 prochaines
8
années.
billion over the next 5
C'est
years.
énorme. C'est que
This
pour moi,
is
il vaut la peine d'essayer.
significant.
Puis
So
je pense que
we need to
quand on
try,
regarde
in my opinion. When
recommandations
we
de
look
Kaplan,
at the Kaplan
c'est clair que
recommendations,
ce
it's
sera pas
clear
tout. Il va falloir que la
that
corporation fasse de
it's
gros
not
efforts
all.
aussi de son côté.
Corporations also
Mais je pense
need to
qu'en
make some
levant
major efforts. What has prevented Canada Post from modernizing? Well, we either inject money or transform the institution so that we have lower deficits and ultimately get to financial viability. That is clear.
Ottawa Citizen.
Hello, Minister. Thanks.
Nice seeing you.
Nice to see you too. Quick question about the direction to the corporation, especially around efficiencies and the lightening and reviewing of the management structure. I'm just wondering and just curious hearing a bit more about that direction. And did you give them a target? And are those efficiencies just for the management level, or are we going to see the efficiencies all the way through Canada Post?
Yeah. So it's throughout the organization, but I want, they must look at management, with a cold, hard look. And I haven't set a target specifically, but I've given them 45 days. And I think there's an understanding that as our government is going through its own comprehensive expenditure review, Canada Post needs to do the same.
Now, I understand that the Kaplan adoption of the Kaplan recommendations is kind of a short-term solution now. I'm curious about the road ahead and that medium to long-term transformation of Canada Post. Can you take us through what are the next steps of this process? What are the conversations being had? And what is the roadmap for the government with Canada Post?
Well, I think we're starting with a pretty big chantier, if you will, with these lifting the moratoriums and going forward with all of the recommendations that Kaplan has highlighted for the government. Now, Canada Post needs to go through a review every 5 years. It's been 7 years since the last review. There will be a review seeking to look at what can be Canada Post in 10, 15, 20 years. I know that OGO, the Parliamentary Committee, will also be looking at Canada Post, most probably. Those reviews, conversations will help inform us. But in the meantime, and I think, given that Canada Post is losing $10 million a day today, we need to take the short-term and immediate steps that will allow Canada Post to, find a more stable financial footing.
Remy Autier, CPAC.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre.
Good afternoon,
Vous
Mr.
annoncez
Minister.
ces changements-là
You're
qui
announcing these changes,
indirectement
which
vont toucher les travailleurs
indirectly
de Post
will
Canada.
impact
Il y a
the
un
workers
conflit
of
de
Canada
travail
Post.
depuis
There's a
des
labor
mois
dispute
entre Post
going on
Canada
for months
et
now between
son
Canada
syndicat,
Post
ses
and
travailleurs.
its union.
Est-ce que c'était le bon moment pour
Was this the right
annoncer
time
la volonté d'avoir des changements majeurs,
to
d'avoir
announce the
un plan
need
sous peu
for
de changer toute la
change,
structure?
the
Est-ce qu'il n'y a
need
pas
for
un
a plan
risque,
to
selon
change
vous?
the structure? Is there no danger
D'abord,
here?
le conflit actuel
Answer.
dure depuis
The
20 mois.
current dispute has
Ça
been
fait quand
going on
même,
for 20
moi
months.
comme ministre responsable, puis
In my
aussi comme
capacity
gouvernement
as
responsable des fonds
minister
publics,
responsible
à
for
partir du
public
moment où
funds
la société
and a government
canadienne des postes
responsible for
perd 10
funds,
millions par
at the
jour,
time when the corporation is
demande
losing
des
$10 million
injections
a
de
day,
capitaux de fonds du gouvernement
asking
fédéral
for injection of
qui sont
funds
toujours
from the federal
grandissants,
government,
je
and
ne pense pas
the
avoir le
requests keep
loisir
increasing,
d'attendre
I don't think I have the
plus longtemps.
leisure to wait
Mon
any
espoir,
longer.
d'avoir parlé
My
avec
hope
tant le syndicat
is, after
qu'avec la
speaking
direction,
with the
c'est
union
que
and
les deux
management,
parties
is that the
ont
two
certainement à cœur
parties
la viabilité financière à long
definitely
terme
care
de
about
Post
the
Canada,
long-term
pas la
viability
même
of Canada
vision sur
Post,
comment y arriver.
not
Ce
necessarily
que
the same
j'espère,
vision on
c'est
how to
qu'en
get there.
envoyant
What
le
I hope
message
is that
aujourd'hui
by
qu'on
sending the
va
message today,
transformer Post Canada
that
parce que c'est nécessaire,
that will
parce
change,
que la
transform
société
Canada
fait face
Post
à une
because it's
crise
necessary, because
existentielle,
the corporation
ça
is facing
puisse,
an existential
dans
crisis,
renouveler
it
ou rétablir
could
la relation et que
restore the
les
relationship
deux parties puissent
so that
négocier à
the
la
two
lumière de ce qui est annoncé
parties
aujourd'hui.
may negotiate in light
Puis
of
l'annonce
today's
d'aujourd'hui
announcement. Question.
couvre
Today's
un
announcement
des deux grands aspects
covers
du
one of
travail
the
de Post
two
Canada,
major
qui est la
aspects
livraison
of Canada
du courrier.
Post
Vous
work,
l'avez dit, la livraison des
mail
colis, il y a
delivery.
eu une
You
baisse
said
de
that
la
there's
part de
been a
marché.
drop of the
Est-ce
market share
qu'il y a
for
des
parcel
éléments, selon
delivery.
vous,
In
que
your
vous offrez aujourd'hui
opinion,
ou que la gestion
are
de
there
Post Canada
any
devrait vous offrir comme solution
elements
pour
that
reprendre les
you're
parts de marché?
offering
Est-ce que,
or
ou
that
est-ce que ça
Canada
va être
Post could
une
offer as a
étape
solution
ultérieure?
to take
Comment
back
vous
part
voyez
of
cet
the
aspect-là
market share?
de la livraison de colis et
How
comment Post Canada peut jouer un
do
rôle
you think
grandissant
that
là-dedans?
Canada Post could
Tout à fait, c'est
play a greater
fondamental,
role
même
in
quand on
parcel
pense
delivery?
aux
Answer.
boîtes
It's
postales
fundamental.
communautaires.
Even when we
On a tous
think
en tête,
about
oui,
community
les
mail
petits casiers
boxes,
pour les lettres, mais il y a
we
aussi des
think of
casiers
the
pour les
little
colis. Je
boxes
pense
for
que ça peut
letters. There are also the
servir
boxes
comme un
for
réseau efficace
parcels.
qui est
This
très
could be an
vaste
efficient
pour
network
livrer des
that
colis à
is
travers
very
le pays.
broad to
Maintenant,
deliver
il y a
parcels
des
throughout the
enjeux au
country.
niveau de
Now,
la capacité
there
de
are
Post
issues
Canada
related to the
de
capacity of
livrer la
Canada
fin de
Post
semaine,
to
par
deliver
exemple,
during the weekends,
de
for
livrer
example,
rapidement, d'être
to
concurrentiel,
deliver quickly in a competitive manner, and that is beyond my capacity as minister. It's up to the union and the management to agree on those issues to improve its capacity to be competitive.
Ashley Burke, CBC.
Good morning, Minister. Is this officially the end of the government bailing out Canada Post?
There will be instances, if you look at the financials, where Canada Post will have to come back to the government for cash injections. So no, but it's a clear message that it will not be, there are limits to our capacity to bail out Canada Post year after year. And we need to, it needs to show a path to financial viability. That's what we're clearly asking the corporation. Oui. On me demandait, je suis pas habitué à ces, en français, en anglais.
I'm not used to switching from English to French. I was being asked if this was the end of the billing out of Canada Post by the federal government. The answer is no. There will be clearly situations when you look at the financial projections of the corporation where the government will still need to inject funds to help out the corporation in its operations. It is, well, we are clearly establishing limits, boundaries, and we are sending a message to the corporation that it needs to find a path towards financial viability. We are giving it the means to get that, including by lifting the moratoriums that have stopped it from doing so.
Clarify, what exactly does this mean for people who are living in rural areas? And also, Canadians don't like cuts to essential services like this. How do you get them to accept this at a time of austerity?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to be extremely clear, when we're lifting the rural moratorium, it's really because that moratorium was put in place in 1994, covers, from memory, 3,962 post offices that used to be rural, but that aren't anymore. And I'll give you some examples. You can think of post offices in Richmond Hill, Gatineau, Stittsville here in the Ottawa region, Burnaby, who might have been rural in 1994, but are clearly more suburban, even urban in some instances. Now, that moratorium prevents Canada Post from closing these post offices or even transforming them to build housing. I have, some examples of locations where if Canada Post was allowed to transform and sell some of its land, we could build hundreds of units. So we're lifting that moratorium to address that challenge primarily. I'm asking the corporation to come back with a plan that will clearly, make sure that rural, remote, Indigenous communities are not impacted. And I want to be crystal clear on this. We know how important Canada Post services are in many, more remote communities across the land. And, the goal is to make sure that these services are preserved. And in fact, if resources are better allocated to underserved areas as opposed to over-serviced areas, we might find gains in rural and remote communities.
They don't like cuts to essential services.
I see it differently. I think, there are choices that we need to make as a government. And the path forward, if we're not doing anything, is $10 million in losses every day. It's billions in repeated bailouts year after year. And that means cuts to some services. So I think there are ways while protecting essential services that Canada Post offers Canadians, that we can make the corporation more efficient so that it can continue its mission and that we as a government can continue, many other essential missions of the states when we think of housing, childcare, support for seniors, and so on and so forth.
We'll now turn online for questions. If you are online and you have a question, please use the raised hand function. We'll start with Hélène Bouzetti.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Lightbound. Vous l'avez mentionné vous-même, si votre
Interpretation will resume when the conditions will be met.
Sur la transition vers les boîtes postales en 2015, vous dites, bon, à l'époque, il n'y avait pas de déficit, mais ça a pris 2-3 années avant que les déficits embarquent. Est-ce que ça ne témoigne pas d'un manque flagrant de vision de la part de votre gouvernement. Et vous avez fait référence à M. Coder. La raison pour laquelle il voulait détruire ces boîtes postales, c'est parce qu'en milieu urbain densément construit, ça peut devenir extrêmement encombrant. Donc, j'aimerais savoir, est-ce que vous avez une solution à ça qu'on ne semblait pas avoir à l'époque?
Oui, ben, pour répondre à la première
Answer
question, je pense que
to
c'est
answer your
le
first
mandat qu'on a
question.
reçu en
The
avril.
mandate
C'est,
we
c'est-
received in
je pense que
April,
plusieurs
and I think
observateurs,
many
probablement dont vous, le
observers,
notent. Il y a
including you, have
un
noted
changement qui est
that
incarné en ce moment
there's
par le
a
premier ministre Carney,
change
par notre nouveau gouvernement, où on est
that
prêt
the
à
new government
faire
and
ce à quoi
Prime
les,
Minister
les
Carney
Québécois, les Canadiens
wants,
s'attendent,
and
c'est-à-dire
we're doing what Quebecers and
prendre des
Canadians
décisions
expect,
difficiles
and that is take difficult decisions
et dépenser moins pour pouvoir
and
investir
spend
davantage
less so we
et
can invest
préserver, entre autres, les
more
programmes sociaux dont je
and
faisais état dans ma
preserve
réponse
the social programs I
précédente.
mentioned in my
Maintenant, par
previous
rapport
answer.
à la
Now,
transition des
talking
boîtes
about
postales
the
communautaires,
transition to community mail
Post Canada a une
boxes,
longue
Canada
expérience en
Post
la
has
matière
great
et j'ai
experience
confiance que
in
d'un point de
that,
vue
and I
opérationnel,
believe
ils
that
vont arriver
even
à le faire de sorte
operationally
à
speaking, they will be able to do
respecter
that,
l'intégrité des territoires et des
respect the
territoires urbains.
integrity
Ça
of
fait.
territories.
Et mon autre question, pas de lien avec la première, mais je me demande s'il n'y a pas quelque chose qui est prématuré dans cette annonce aujourd'hui, alors que, objectivement, vous ne faites rien pour accélérer le règlement du conflit de travail. Le rapport Kaplan est assez clair qu'il y a des pertes énormes, par exemple, avec ces postiers qui, s'ils finissent avant la fin de la journée, ils ne peuvent pas être déplacés sur une autre ligne pour aller faire le travail supplémentaire d'un collègue. On doit payer des heures supplémentaires alors que d'autres personnes qui ne travaillent pas alors qu'ils sont payés quand même. Est-ce qu'on n'aurait pas dû régler ce problème-là avant d'arriver et faire des changements fondamentaux dans le service qui est offert aux citoyens?
Oui, bien, d'abord,
Answer.
dans la mesure où ce que vous venez de soulever relève des
To
négociations
the extent
entre le
that
syndicat et la
it
direction, je
depends
pense que
on negotiations between the
respecte
union
le processus.
and
Et c'est
management,
pas de mon
I
ressort,
respect
c'est de
the
mon ressort, c'est de
process.
notre ressort
That
comme
is not
gouvernement.
within my purview.
Et c'est très
What
clairement
is
indiqué dans le rapport
within my
Kaplan.
control
C'est la
as a
levée de ces
government is
moratoires,
clearly
c'est
indicated
changer le
in the
processus
Kaplan
pour
report,
l'augmentation du prix
lift
des
the
timbres
moratorium,
et essayer de modifier le
change
standard
the
de service. Et
process
c'est
for
exactement
stamp
ce qu'on fait aujourd'hui.
rates, and change
Mais
delivery
vous pourriez
standards. And that's what
forcer
we're doing today.
un arbitrage, par exemple.
Ben, c'est pas l'objectif. Pour
Answer.
l'instant, moi,
That
j'ai
is not
j'ai
our
l'espoir, au
objective for
contraire, que
now.
l'annonce d'aujourd'hui peut,
Today's
je suis
announcement,
peut-être optimiste,
I may be being
mais j'ai l'espoir que
optimistic,
l'annonce
but I
d'aujourd'hui
hope
peut,
that today's
disons,
announcement
donner de nouvelles bases
will
aux
provide
négociations entre les
a
deux parties
new
et qu'ils puissent
ground for
négocier à la lumière de ce qui a
negotiation
été
so that the
annoncé, et
parties
certainement à la
could
lumière de
negotiate
la
in light
réalité
of what has
financière
been
de Post
announced
Canada qui est,
today.
comme vous le savez,
As you know,
extrêmement
the
précaire.
financial situation of Canada Post is
Greg
very
Quinn, Market News
precarious.
International.
Good afternoon. With respect to the labor issue here, can this kind of restructuring be done without major wage cuts or layoffs? I mean, given you're talking about billions of dollars of losses and letter volume having fallen 70% in recent years?
Yeah, I think when you look at what we're announcing, for instance, in terms of community mailboxes, the implementation will be phased, and a lot of the reduction in workforce will be able to happen through attrition. But at the same time, I'm not managing Canada Post on a day-to-day basis. I leave it to the corporation to review its structure, review its operation to reduce costs. Because as I've highlighted, we cannot go on, Canadians can't go on footing the bill day after day, year after year, with increasing deficits.
To follow up, other industries like autos and airlines that have heavily unionized workforces, when there are cutbacks, there are often other labor costs like pension shortfalls. Are those kinds of things that you're going to be looking at as well, or will taxpayers be picking up that part of any tab as well?
That's a good question. My understanding is the pension is fully funded. That's not an issue, but we'll, of course, as the sole shareholder of Canada Post, I'll always keep a close eye on its financial situation, and which is why I'm here today.
We have time for one more question online, and it'll be Josh Rubin from the Toronto Star.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. Just wondering what you would say to some of those Canada Post employees who are almost certainly looking at losing their jobs, as part of this restructuring, as part of this new vision for the corporation. I mean, what message would you give to them? And do you have some sympathy for people who put in decades of work and kind of gone out, the rain or snow and all of the and all of the poetic stuff that we've always heard over the years?
Well, first, I would say that I have the utmost respect and admiration for postal workers for everything they've done for years to Canadians and that they do day in and day out. And what this announcement is about saving Canada Post, making sure that it has a future, a viable future. And I think it will require postal workers, to work with us. And I'm confident that we can get through this and save Canada Post.
And just one quick follow-up, if I may. I mean, you have kind of, I don't want to say avoided, but you've kind of danced around a little bit about the possibility of layoffs. Are you saying that there won't be any layoffs, or is it more realistic to expect layoffs? And if so, do you have any particular scale of layoffs? I mean, point taken that management takes the ultimate responsibility, but this is a political decision today, so that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, well, the political decision is that Canadians can be footing an ever-growing bill year after year. Now, I'm not, in the daily management of Canada Post. I've asked them for a plan within 40 days on how they intend to reduce costs. I've asked them to take a cold, hard look at their management structure, and I'll be reviewing their plan when it comes. But the goal here and the political objective is that, we can't go on with Canada Post losing $10 million a day and Canadian taxpayers footing the bill.
Thank you so much. That concludes today's press conference.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.